Welcome to In Focus with Silvana Pavlovska. Today is the 16th of April, 2024, and we are going to continue the broadcast of the publication by Professor Dr. Igor Janev, which we started in February this year, titled The PRESPA Agreement as Cultural Genocide of the Macedonian National Identity Towards the Termination of an Illegal Treaty. This is part of our series on the Macedonian question. And as it pertains to this book, we are actually now covering chapter 5 and 5.2 in particular. Welcome once again to In Focus with Silvana Pavlovska, broadcasting from Melbourne, Australia. 5.2, necessity to overthrow the anti-national government of the SDSM and a referendum as a tool for that goal and preservation of the nation. After the conclusion of the protocol for the implementation of the so-called French proposal for the EU negotiations with Macedonia, with a backing of international community, the international community being the USA and the EU, against the will of the Macedonian people, raising dissatisfaction and disapproval, have united all the Macedonian political opposition parties against the puppet government, which apparently conducted external policies and agendas aimed at imposing and forcing assimilation of the Macedonian people into Bulgarian, assimilating them into being Bulgarian. The necessity to overthrow the anti-national puppet government of the SDSM became a matter of national survival. For leaders of the opposition parties, became blatantly clear that without the popular endorsement of such fundamental constitutional changes by the people's vote, that is the referendum, Parliament could not alone enact any law or legislation or any constitutional revisions demanded by the European Union, the Bulgarians, or even an entire international community. In that view, VMRO de Permanent requested that popular referendum be organized to check whether people support and endorse the French proposal, and even a treaty of friendship with Bulgaria from 2017 as a ground and pillar for any proposed changes, and hence the EU conditions for membership. After the strong objections to an idea to hold a referendum by the governing SDSM party, the opposition party, the major opposition party, VMRO de Permanent, responded with the following quotation: if SDSM believes that the people are with them, it should not be afraid and support the referendum initiative. The leader of VMRO, Mickovski, steadfastly defended his ground idea that the referendum on Bulgarian demands must be conducted. Quotation: regarding the debate in the public, there is a strange situation, and that is that the opponents of the referendum declaration of the people are the government and those installations of the government in opposition. It is a strange situation that unites those installations of the government in opposition and between the Macedonian people and the government itself. And all the rest, the vast majority of citizens, regardless of their ethnicity, are in favor of holding a referendum, end of quote. According to Daily Republica, that's a newspaper, Christian Mickoski indicated that for the idea of a referendum, he received vast support from the Central Committee of his party, and that in the forthcoming period, quotation, the consultations with the experts and the public will follow, end of quotation. In our view, says Professor Dr. Igor Janev, the author of this publication that I'm sharing with you with his permission, expressed permission, the initiative for popular referendum or plebiscite was generally sincere, but the leadership of Vermero didn't consider at that time all the variables related to the actual turnout probability for the validity of plebiscite with respect to high referendum census percentage constitutionally needed in this process. Constitutionally prescribed level of 50% census necessary for its validity was in fact unreachable. In the absence of the prescribed required 50% census for the turnout, the results of the referendum would not be valid, and as a result could become self-defeating. The result of insufficient turnout in the referendum would only serve as proof that by boycotting or abstinence, people in fact were not against the assimilation or Bulgarization. Bulgarization is in quotations. At this point, we may derive an opinion that, bearing in mind that 50% turnout represents the actual participation of over 912,000 people, to be valid, an idea and decision of Vermero to go with the plebiscite initiative was a risky one and possibly disastrous. Having in mind that on the previous referendum held in 2018, only 36.7% was the turnout, insufficient for it to be valid, and that presently the Albanian population will boycott the current initiative as they support the Bulgarian Treaty of Friendship along with their demands. An outcome of the future plebiscite would not be satisfactory as it will fail, says the professor. Despite of our predictions and predictions of other analysts indicating extreme level of risk to fail, leadership of the Vermero did not grasp the logic, and the steadfastly continued with this initiative. In the following period, Vermero, with its experts in secret or behind the public, without the public knowledge, were engaged on an issue how to formulate the question for the referendum's vote. Apparently, Vermero de Permane, with support of the other Macedonian opposition parties, took stand that any referendum on the identity matter could serve for overthrowing the government and initiating conditions for the general or early or extraordinary elections. In fact, from the present perspective, it seems that the overthrowing the government was the main goal for initiating the referendum. After a couple of weeks from the moment of launching the idea, the leadership of the Macedonian opposition, not only the Vermero one, but other political parties as well, such as the party of the leftists, or known as Levica, couldn't just admit that idea for plebiscite was likely to be disastrous. Even from the beginning, it was sufficiently clear, due to the statistical variables indicating relatively low turnout of Macedonians, particularly under the current government and the organization of the SDSM and the Albanian party DUI, having at their disposal all of the tools of the propaganda and pressure. In the process of constructing the proper question for the referendum, Vermero and their experts correctly concluded that the major obstacle for preservation of the national identity was the Treaty of Friendship between Macedonia and Bulgaria, concluded in 2017. In the report by Republica, we found that Vermero's statement quotation, VMRO-DPMNE is starting a procedure for a mandatory referendum with the aim of cancelling the government with cancelling the agreement, I beg your pardon, with Bulgaria, signed by SDSM, which is the root of all negotiations, end of quote. On the other hand, the European Union, and particularly the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of North Macedonia, in quotation, Ministry of Foreign Affairs of North Macedonia, were actively sabotaging the referendum as they were against any obstacles to the Bulgarian conditions and the EU accession negotiations. The obstacle, this word is in quotations, such an initiative for a referendum, crucial questions with respect to Macedonian identity needed to be undermined. It was reported that the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Macedonia, B. Osmani, we've mentioned him before, he's Albanian, and declared as such in the government of Macedonia, interfered on matters regarding the decision on the initiative of the referendum at his meeting with the Portuguese Minister of Foreign Affairs, when he stated, we quote, "We put a lot of effort during our presidency to put together a proposal that we wanted to be accepted. What makes the French proposal better? In politics, the goal is not to achieve everything, but what is possible. If you look over the horizon and not concentrate only on current events. That is why I give credit to the Macedonian leadership for overcoming the difficulties and moving the process forward. A very important step forward has been made. We believe that the agreement that has been reached is an agreement that follows the beginning of the screening process, which is quite intensive and technically has two phases. The first is an explanatory screening, and the EC explains the different phases, that is the aspects of the legislation. Then follows the bilateral screening when the gaps in the legislative framework of Macedonia are determined. Says Gomez Cravino, adding that the second intergovernmental conference will be held as soon as the screening is finished and as soon as the constitutional amendments are completed, assessing that all countries have difficult moments during the negotiations. But in the case of Macedonia, he sees no reason that there will be bilateral blockades. In addition, SDSM and DUI from the very beginning took clear and very loud positions against the idea for referendum, indicating that they will do all and anything in their power to obstruct and undermine this idea, and in fact, not to allow people to decide on that matter at all. In the Macedonian media's reports, we found on one side strong objections to the referendum initiative by Dimitar Kochevsky, and the other side, sharp criticism by VMRO. Quotation, Kovachevsky is ignoring the people by running away from the referendum and does nothing about the energy crisis, only raises prices, end of quote. And more, quote, it is appalling that Kovachevsky persistently lies to the people that the language and identity are protected with a negotiating framework, and it actually gives Bulgaria the opportunity, if the Commission for Historical Issues does not agree on a specific issue, to block us. That is, to veto our European Union path until the Bulgarian ultimatum is fulfilled. What does that mean? This means that the attitudes regarding history must be equated with the Bulgarian view, and we see that it denies the language and the nation, so we have a block about which nothing is written in the frame, but which would happen if the constitution was changed and started with negotiation on the Bulgarian terms. And all this will result in complete Bulgarization, says the party. Kovachevsky knew all that, but he is consciously pushing Bulgarization just to stay in power for one more day. And this is exactly why a referendum is needed, which will prevent his betrayal directly, this betrayal directed by Kovachevsky and Pendarovsky. Kovachevsky being the outgoing prime minister and Pendarovsky the outgoing president as of this day, being the 16th of April, 2024. And that has been part 1 of chapter 5.2, contained in the scholarly paper by Professor Dr. Igor Janev, an eminent international law expert and author of many books on international law. And it's titled The PRESPA Agreement as Cultural Genocide of the Macedonian National Identity Towards the Termination of an Illegal Treaty. You've been listening to In Focus with Silvana Pavlovska. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to seeing you soon when we will continue chapter 5, part 2.